Welcome to Brainwaves Bistro. Grab yourselves a cuppa, kick back, and join us for mental health talk with a positive vibe. Here's Julianne.
Such an exciting and thought-provoking chat today. Yes, we're going to talk about some areas of science and spirituality, the synthesis of science and spirituality. I quote that from Dr. Eben Alexander's book, which we'll talk about shortly. We're going to look at such areas as psychic mediumship, near and shared death experiences, and reincarnation. Exciting, very. So put away your skeptic side, move out of that, be open and listen. This could change how you think about life and death. It could be life-changing and so comforting. Yet again, we welcome neurosurgeon and top-listed New York Times best-selling author, as I said, Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon, cited as one of the most influential leaders, the top 100 spiritual influences of our time, alongside the Dalai Lama, Pope Francis, and Oprah. What a privilege. Oh, and of course we can't, if you could only see her, the beautiful and gracious Karen Newell, founder of Sacred Acoustics and a life student of the spiritual wisdom of the ancients. So much to learn here. You even studied, Karen, the Dead Sea Scrolls. How amazing. So great to have you both. What a privilege, as I said, and I've been so much looking forward to this. Welcome, Karen and Eben.
Julianne, thanks so much for having us on. It's great to be with you today.
Yes, this is going to be fun. We love coming to speak with you.
Oh, we love having you. And of course, when I say we're talking about our wonderful co-host, Barb Smith, and she's going to tell us a little bit later of her experience in line with what you're talking about, how the power of the mind and her spirituality helped her win her battle over stage 4 cancer. So listen in, folks. Hi, lovely Barb. She's
Hi,
there.
Julianne and Karen and Eben. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Eben, in your first book, Proof of Heaven, a neurosurgeon's journey into the afterlife, your near-death experience and then yours and Karen's journey to write together this later book that I keep reading it. I fess up, I've read both your books twice. Probably be a third time. Living in a Mindful Universe. As I said, I love both books, and guys, it's a must read. Now, Eben, let's start from the beginning. Your near-death experience.
Well, I'm going to be very, very brief because that story can take a very long time to tell. Importantly, the unusual feature of it was that I was amnesic. I had no memories of Eben Alexander's life. And to be brief, given that amnesia, I started in what I call the earthworm's eye view, a very primitive course on responsive realm. I went up through a brilliant light portal associated with music, leading into an ultra-real gateway valley, a realm much more real than this one. That's the same realm where we would have, for example, life reviews. So birth, death, everything in between can be simultaneously presented. That shows you this is not just dreams and vague memories. This is a reliving of events, very important. And in that Gateway Valley, I met a guardian angel who was very important. People who've read the book Proof of Heaven will recognize that 4 months after my coma, I received a picture in the mail that helped me identify that beautiful spiritual guardian. And that was my proof, my absolute kind of shocking sense of the ultra reality of it all. And, you know, there's way too much to tell for this NDE, given all the other material we have to cover. But essentially, for me as a neurosurgeon, it was proof positive that the brain does not create consciousness, because I had an extraordinary set of experiences, of detailed memories that all occurred when my brain was incapacitated, according to objective medical data. That's not just what I presented in Proof of Heaven, but also is there in a case report on my medical records in September 2018, Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases. But that case report made it very clear that brain could not have produced a dream or hallucination. And also, given whatever your attitude about all of this is, the fact that I had this stunning, complete recovery defies a medical precedent. And those are really the seeds of the power of my NDE and why it's proven to me and to scientists around the world that the brain is not the creator of consciousness at all, that consciousness uses our brain as a filter. And that's what allows consciousness and our brain to interact. But it's a much richer story of the primacy of mind and consciousness and the binding force of love that ultimately emerges from these very powerful stories.
Yeah, I want to do something here because I want to go on to just a little bit about science, and good scientist knows, I believe, that he doesn't know. And I just want to quote this to you. Someone I admire, who's rest in peace. Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, right? A spirit vastly superior to that of man, and one in the face of which we, with our modest powers, must feel humble. Now, that was our Albert Einstein, and that's quoted from your book, Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. He found things, he found things spooky in science, and that gave him a spiritual leaning. Would you like to talk about briefly about science and its inability to explain our existence?
Well, I wouldn't say inability at all. Science is one of the best tools we have for getting to deep, profound answers about the nature of reality. And there are ways in science that we can objectively come to agree about those facts. That's why science is so extremely valuable in this discourse. Now, the mistake so many people make is they think that our modern conventional science is an outmoded Newtonian determinism, mechanistic, and that's where they get it wrong. And so science is very valuable. But that old materialistic assumption of science from the 20th century that was so prevalent is completely discarded, gone, forget about it.
And that assumption is that only the physical world is
right,
real.
the assumption that only the physical world exists. And so what we come to recognize is in trying to understand the brain-mind connection that you cannot get it all from a physical world alone. It just doesn't happen. There's non-local aspects of consciousness like telepathy, remote viewing, all of these phenomena of near-death experiences, shared death, deathbed visions, they're all examples of consciousness much grander than anything that could ever be simply produced by the brain in one individual brain and body. So science is actually the pathway out of this crazy morass we've worked our way into. But it's real science. It's quantum-informed science that acknowledges the deep reality of the brain-mind connection and what quantum physics is teaching us about the primacy of consciousness. And that's where we need to grow up and mature. And that's where the very fact that the Nobel Prize Committee in 2022 gave the prize for entanglement, that's the spooky aspect at a distance you're referring to, that Einstein did not like about quantum physics. But he thought that there would be hidden variables involved that would allow for, a more conventional kind of local realism conclusion to be drawn. And yet all the experiments, over 40 years plus of quantum experiments, beginning in the 70s, showed us that Einstein was wrong. Spooky action at a distance is absolutely real. Entanglement shows an information connection between subatomic particles that transcends all of our normal notions of space and time. And it basically shows this mind to be instantaneously present throughout the universe, which violates Einstein's very special theory of relativity and the notion that information transfer would be limited to the speed of light. So we're not talking about an anti-science position. We're talking about science finally claiming the truth position, but it cannot do it through materialism. It can only do it through much grander views like idealism or panentheism that involve this kind of mind over matter or spirit over matter as the dominant mode of understanding the way our universe works.
Yeah, and as you said, it is the synthesis of science and spirituality, which I'm going to title this actual interview, because I think that's the essence of it, isn't it? I might have got a little bit off with Einstein, but I defer to your interpretation, guys. And what I'm going to talk about now, or ask you, mediumship and psychics. It's something I'm fascinated with, and I was very much a materialist until about 5 years ago, and I met this wonderful lady, Lucy Pollard, and she is now a very close friend, and she's taken me into the other realm and shown me that I can get so much comfort and joy through my ability to talk to the other in the afterlife. And yes, there are so many things that no one would know that Lucy has been able to access for me. So there you go, folks. I am a total advocate. Can you tell us, Eben and Karen, how this psychic ability that perhaps we all have can enhance our lives, and a little bit about it?
Yes, well, I can start with that. As it happens, after-death communications are one of the most common spiritual experience someone can have. And that's where a loved one who has died might appear before them, say in a dream or a vision. This happens to more than half of our population, but nobody's talking about it. We're afraid to talk about it because what usually happens when you bring something up like this is you get made fun of. People make light of it. They think you're crazy. They think it's just silly. But fortunately, we've had some scientists who have taken the topic very seriously. And one of them is a woman named Julie Beischel. She's a PhD in psychology. We're not certain exactly.
She's smart. She's very smart, right?
Very academically educated. And she lost her mother. She had her own kind of grappling with grief. And somehow, even as a scientist, she found herself going to a medium. And like you said, she learned things from this medium, from her mother, through this medium, that really just shocked her. And this made her realize, even as a scientist, that mediums are getting information from somewhere. And so she really wanted to set on a path to study how this could work. And so over the years, she's worked with different scientists, but she has founded Windbridge Institute. And this is where she very seriously studies mediums. And what she's done is she finds out about mediums who seem to be talented, and then she tests them. And only when mediums have passed her very vigorous tests are they allowed to be part of her research. But the test itself is what's so amazing, because it's a quintuply blinded test. Now, blinding in scientific research is where not every scientist involved in the research knows every aspect of that science, of the steps of that research. They're actually blind to some of those things. And so she set up a 5-level blinded system where she hooked mediums up with people who had lost their loved ones. And all she would get from the sitter is who the surviving loved one is the first name of their loved one. And she would pass that on to the medium. She actually wouldn't pass it on. It would be passed to someone else who then would pass it on, right? So all of these blinding levels. And so these mediums would connect with this first person name. And part of the protocols was that the sitter, the one who lost their loved one, needed to ask their loved one if they would make this connection. So somehow in their, inner world, they just say to their loved one, please connect with this medium when you're asked. That's part of her protocol, and it seems to make a difference. And so when she has these people get all this, the mediums write down all this information, and then she gives it to the sitters to say, is any of this true? They never even see the medium. Lots of people will say, oh, mediums just pick up clues from the person sitting in front of them, how, you know, what they need to say to make them happy. But these people never even know who each other are. So that's another level of blinding. At any rate, she found something like a 85% success rate, 78 to 82, something in there of information that could be found. And so it's not just me sitting there hearing about my grandmother deciding, oh, no one could have known this. This has to be true. She's put it through the rigorous scientific protocols and found amazing mediums. Now, not all mediums are amazing. That's another thing to remember. But some of them are. And those are the mediums that she will use for her research. She's hooked them up to brainwave devices. She's had them fill out countless questionnaires. She's learned that mediums know the difference between
psychic information they might be picking
and actually connecting to another soul. It feels different. There's an emotional component that's very important.
That is the difference between connection with someone who's left the physical plane as opposed to connecting with someone who's still alive. Those are the two differences.
Just kind of information.
Right, in the active field. Right,
like that.
Exactly. But she's shown both of them are active channels.
Yeah, and it's that emotional connection with people who have died. That's what media recognize as authentic contact. So lots of amazing research out there.
I'll simply add, I mean, I love Julie Beischel's work. Windbridge.org is a great resource for people who want to learn a lot more. She also wrote one of the top Bigelow Institute essays from 3 years ago in a contest for scientific validation of the reality of the afterlife. Hers was one of the winning 29 essays available at bigelowinstitute.org.
And that's where she totally focuses on the mediumship work as the evidence that our consciousness continues after death.
Well, she may actually, fingers crossed, join Barb and I one day. Thanks to you all. Thank you, guys. You've done it again. But, Evan, I read the story and I've listened to her. She's brilliant. Laura Linley Jackson. You had I forgot that right, but she is wonderful. And she's almost as beautiful as Karen. She's lovely. There you go.
She is beautiful soul.
She's done readings for both of us. Amazing.
Oh, has she? Would you like to expand on that? I'll
just share that I was first introduced to her maybe 11, 12 years ago. Before we met, yeah. And so anyway, but just with the general idea that she could give me some information. And so, that I was just very...
We had met. By
you met in 2011. Is that right?
But anyway, the fact of the matter is she picked up things on my story that were very, very interesting. And we mentioned some of that in our book at Living in a Mindful Universe. I mean, one of the things that really sticks in my mind is she knew immediately, the only fact she'd been given about me was the name Eben Alexander III, MD, and that was on an email. So that's why she knew I was an MD and Eben Alexander III. But I remember when I was talking with her, she said, but there's something wrong with this numbering. They're off. It turns out when I fished for more detail from her, she picked up on the fact that when
he was the fifth, not the third.
I was the fifth, not the third. That has to do with the fact that when my father was born, he would have been the third, but his grandfather had already passed, Eben Alexander, the senior version. And so my grandfather decided to recycle the names. And even though he would have then become the third, my father the fourth, and I was the fifth. That's actually what Laura Lynn discerned. Nobody, not even my sisters, knew that deep story. My father had shared it with, ages ago. Nobody else knew about it at all. And for her to pick up on it so readily really got my attention.
It was one of the first things she said to you.
Yeah, it was. You're off. There's something wrong with the numbering.
So that gets your attention.
That absolutely got my attention.
Very first mediumship reading.
It was.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there were a number of things that she picked up on, but that was absolutely a stunning start to kind of get me engaged. And then it turned out, she was definitely much more in tune with who I was and kind of my past and helping me connect the dots because of just her natural abilities. And I love her book, The Light Between Us, where she shares her origin story of how, as a young child, she basically knew, I think it was a grandfather or something, who ended up dying. And she knew the circumstances of that in advance. And of course, as a young child, that was very frightening to her. And she did not like one bit the fact that she'd had this kind of foreknowledge of this beloved grandfather. So anyway, that's kind of the beginning. And I highly recommend her book. And and she's written others since then, but that one is
I have tried to contact her, but she's a very busy lady. But one day, maybe.
She's not even answering our emails these days. But, very good. But
she probably reads that you've sent them.
I know she knows.
But I wanted to point out that Laura Lynn, at a young age, having this kind of ability, this is very common amongst natural mediums. Many, many, many of the most talented mediums had this natural ability as a child. And it actually frightened most of them. Who wants to know that someone close to them is about to die? I mean, this is something they had to grapple with. Many of them shut down their abilities, Laura Lynn being one of them, and then had to regain those abilities, but with a little more ability to manage the experiences, right? So instead of being bombarded by all of these souls who need to pass messages on, she, along with many other talented mediums, they develop systems for, and they all seem to have kind of their own little system, but they separate people in their minds, and they have a whole way of figuring out what generation of connection. And it's really quite fascinating how they learn to organize all of this information within their mind in order to then pass it on.
I've asked my lovely Lucy, how does it happen? And she said, I can't really explain it to you, but it just is. But again, if any of my friends want to talk to me, if they're not too nervous, I can tell them amazing stories of my experiences. Now, I'm going to just briefly touch on, if you'd explain this organization with Virginia University, or the University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies, and what it does, just briefly.
Okay, they're 12 miles from us in Charlottesville, Virginia, University of Virginia, which was founded by Thomas Jefferson. And in the late 1960s, Ian Stevenson was the head of psychiatry there, and he used to get claims of children remembering past lives. So they would go investigate them to see what kind of psychiatric issues were involved. And of course, back in the late 60s, they thought, well, we'll uncover, where these fantasies are coming from or hallucinations. But then what they discovered is that they could actually find a record of the person who lived before that the child is describing. Many children might claim past life memories, but how often do people actually investigate them in a rigorous scientific fashion? Well, it turns out when you do, you end up getting a lot of positive hits of, oh my God, this is very real. Reincarnation is real. So that since the 1960s, when that work began, and in the early 2000s, Jim Tucker took over that work. Interesting thing to note is Jim Tucker and Stevenson will both tell you it's important to harvest these memories before age 6 or 7, because after that age, the memories are spontaneously covered over. They're forgotten. It's a process that I call programmed forgetting. It's a very important concept to get about all this, because most of us as teenagers and adults don't have memories of past lives. But of course, most of us didn't have a team of scientists to dive in deeply to try and investigate our claims of a past life, and then end up proving that those events actually happened for somebody who lived before. And to date, At the University of Virginia, they've studied, I think, around 2,700 cases of claims of past life memories in children. And growing. Yeah. And of those cases, 1,700 are solved. That is, they actually found the person who lived before. And they do a lot of work. Wow. 1,700 cases have been solved. That is, yes, they found, wow, reincarnation is real. Here's another example of reincarnation in humans. And they do their homework. Of course, occasionally people might try and be fraudulent about such claims or what have you. But in fact, what they find more commonly as a problem is people mislead themselves. So that's why it's important, if your child is making such claims, don't give them leading information and questions. It's important to write down and take notes of the things they make, the claims they make, but also reach out to an investigator like Jim Tucker at UVA or Carol Bowman, Jim Matlock, one of the other renowned global investigators, and have them take over the investigation so they can really do it professionally, because these things can get very kind of off the rails if they're not handled by professionals in terms of proving the reality of the connection.
But most parents, when they hear these kinds of things, they're not interested in proof. They're just interested in the well-being of their child.
Right.
And many times the memories that these children have are related to phobias, to, things that aren't so comfortable. So they're very likely to be concerned. And it's very often when the deeper the emotional engagement, the more likely potentially that it is a real connection and not some kind of fantasy. Because they find both. They find the fantasy type and the real connection. But when children are really disturbed or really affected by certain things, or they have similar, like they're afraid of water, terribly afraid of water, but nobody understands why. It could be related to the fact that they drowned in a previous life. That's what the past life memory research shows us, is that very often phobias are related to how a person died previously. So this is, it's not a lighthearted thing. Oh, let me find out who I was before. Usually children who have these memories are, they're stuck. They're stuck somehow. And that's why psychiatrists are the ones who research them, because they really need that body of knowledge to really help children and their parents get through these kinds of things.
I'll point out another interesting feature of Ian Stevenson's work, as he kind of concluded it all in the early 2000s, is roughly 1/3 of the hundreds of cases he had investigated, roughly 1/3 of these children actually had a skin.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Could you, sorry, I've overtalked you. Could you repeat that for me, Evan?
Sorry?
I overtalked you. Apologies. No, we can fix that. Could you please just reiterate?
I was just going to add that one thing that Ian Stevenson pointed out when he summarized his multi-decade career work in these reincarnation cases in the early 2000s is that 1/3 of them, and there were hundreds of cases, I don't recall the exact number, but 1/3 of these hundreds of cases, the child had a deformity of skin deformity or a limb deformity, a malformed hand, birthmark, what have you, that was there that corresponded to the lethal wound of their prior lifetime.
So a bullet wound or a stab wound.
What have you. But
in the same location.
That's kind of a fascinating, from a biological, psychological, a biophysical standpoint, an absolutely amazing statistic of this intensely scientifically investigated group of people and claims.
Meaning somehow the spirit of that person affected their physical body. That's what we mean by over matter.
Because only 1/5 of those Division of Perceptual Studies cases, only 1/5 of them are in the same family, where you might postulate some kind of hereditary information transfer.
Like a hereditary birthmark.
Yeah, exactly. But the other 80% are not related at all. And yet these birthmarks are there broadly through this population of children.
Yeah. Well, when we think about Karen in particular, studying ancient cultures or and in your work with sacred acoustics, and you can go there on Google sacredacoustics.com. That's right, to find out more. But I've been following, as I follow you, a neuroscientist, Dr. Tara Swart, and she's of an Indian descent. She says, yeah, we were brought up. We all believe in reincarnation. It's part of our culture. It's us in the Western world that go, and we're a bit nervous about it. Oh, it can't be. It's woohoo. But in so many cultures, reincarnation is a fact of life. Even in our Indigenous and Aborigines, they do believe, very much so, that they are the reincarnation of a former relative, usually a grandfather or great-grandfather in the case of boys. So it's something, if we study the ancients, it just shows us that in our Western culture, we're not absorbing as much as we can. By blocking it off, we can enhance our lives so much more. Don't you agree, guys?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And I think the key thing to get here is this is a deeply scientific revolution. And to those who follow the evidence and study the science and who unite these kind of widely varying kind of concepts, near-death experiences, shared death, after-death communications, and then, of course, telepathy, remote viewing, quantum physics, which has been screaming at us for the better part of a century that consciousness is fundamental, and yet so many brilliant scientists in the world of physics have been unable to connect the dots. But that's why that Entanglement Award for the Nobel Prize in 2022 is so important. But it's really a unification of all of these kind of lines of evidence, and you need a kind of a specialist in everything, which I guess is a generalist. And it's one of the reasons we've gotten in so much trouble here is we keep looking to the specialist. But here it would take a specialist in neuroscience, philosophy of mind, quantum physics, parapsychology, all that non-local consciousness. You'd have to be a specialist in all those fields to start putting it together. And that's what we tried to do in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. That's why it's a big kind of head start in these kind of arguments, but it's really about understanding the primacy of mind. And the important thing for human beings is it also reawakens in them the possibilities for the power of their free will to influence their emerging reality. Because that materialist science is so lost, they will try and tell you there is no free will, that your consciousness is an illusion. So in other words, this revolution is greatly needed by the modern human.
And I would just say, while we're waiting for science to catch up with all of this.
I love that, Karen.
You made a very interesting point that ancient cultures knew a lot of this, and somehow science is what decided, oh no, that's just nonsense. Now, some of it potentially was nonsense, but some of it was not. And so for science to now finally say, oh my gosh, wow, look at this mediumship. There's spirit over matter going on and miraculous healing, all kinds of things going on. We know because we have been experiencing these things, and the science is finally starting to pay attention. So we don't have to wait for science to catch up with us. We can fully embrace this worldview, as so many people around the world are already doing. I've spoken to scientists, specifically Dr. Christopher Kerr, who's done a lot of hospice work and discovered that the process of dying actually matches what near-death experiencers tell us. And so he discovered this from an allopathic kind of tradition, and he's been amazed, but nobody else in his peers are not amazed. They're sort of kind of going, hey, that's not really what we do. So what he's saying is the change is not going to come from within these scientific organizations. It's going to come from the people, the grassroots people, sort of demanding from their doctors, from their psychiatrists and other scientists, explain how this could be. And so this really returns, I hate to say the power, but the understanding of our reality right back to us, because we can trust our personal experiences, knowing that there is a worldview that can explain them, and not to just have that, haughty, arrogant science tell us, oh, that was just an illusion. We know it just happened. Evan knows that what happened during his coma was absolutely real, more real than anything else he's ever experienced. Until it happens to you, especially scientists, they just want to brush it aside. So that is another reason why generating direct personal experience can be so valuable. So that's where you actually understand, oh, I'm part spirit. I have this spirit. Getting to know your inner world through practices of meditation, going within, contemplation, prayer, mindfulness, all of those things allow you to kind of manage your personal local consciousness in a way that adds to the whole in beneficial ways. And I'm speaking broadly here, but really it's just starting a practice of going within. And you mentioned Sacred Acoustics. These are recordings that we create that contain binaural beats. And these binaural beats are associated with different brainwave states. And so if you have a really busy, active brain and you find meditation to be rather challenging, like I did, binaural beats can help lower the activity in your brain to states that are associated with meditation, the theta state, to states that are associated with focus and concentration, the alpha state, or the delta state, which is associated with sleep. Now, especially attractive to us is that state right between awake and asleep. That's the hypnagogic space. That's the state where interesting things can happen, where you can make connections, where you kind of forget about a little bit about your physical existence and identify a little bit more with your spiritual existence. And getting practice with this is quite useful because if we are spiritual beings, one day we're going to leave our physical bodies, and having some idea of what that awareness feels like when you're not focused on your physical body, that can be quite useful. Not that there's any rush, and there's plenty of value that can come from practices of meditation. So if that's any trouble for you at all, check out sacredacoustics.com. We have a pilot study that shows a reduction in anxiety. We have all kinds of testimonials from different listeners and how they've used the recordings. And really, you just got to try it. There's a free sample. You're going to want to have headphones or earbuds to get the fullest benefit. But go ahead to sacredacoustics.com. Look for those free samples. Give it a try. See what it feels like. Everyone's unique and will respond differently. So the only way to know is to try it for yourself.
Well, I have. And as you know, I've said I have troubles with sleep. And yes, it has enhanced my ability to relax and sleep. So thank you, Karen. So that's it. Everybody must go to sacredacoustics.com and find out for yourself. You can even listen to some of the, how would you say? You say it, the beats.
Binaural beats.
Binaural beats. I have trouble with that word. That can access you to a brainwave area that may help you. And a lot's been done with mental disorders too, and issues with, you've actually done research and you've offered your research to the Black Dog Institute for Mental Health Research. Bless you. Thank you for nothing. Can you just mention here how it has helped so many people in mental distress?
Well, yes, the pilot study we did took place in a psychiatric practice in New York City. So you can imagine the stress levels in a busy city like that. And what she did was she prescribed basically a set of recordings. These are available on the website called the Whole Mind Bundle. She prescribed this set of recordings to her patients, and those who listened to them for 2 weeks or more and filled out the state trait anxiety inventory showed a reduction in anxiety of 26%. Whoa. Just after 2 weeks of listening. That was the average. And that was their trait anxiety. The trait anxiety is the anxiety that you have all the time. The state anxiety is certain situations make you anxious. So to actually affect the trait anxiety was rather remarkable. And the control group were her psychiatric patients who did not choose to listen to the recordings. They saw a reduction in their anxiety of 7% over the same length of time.
And they had standard talk therapy for anxiety.
Like CBT, yeah.
Yeah. So rather remarkable. And that's why we make these recordings available to everyone, with my gratitude for taking time to reduce your own anxiety.
So that's a peer-reviewed study by Dr. Anna Yusum in the February 2020 Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases. That's where that appears.
Well, thank you for what you do that in that area and what you've told us. What I'm going to talk about now, just briefly, is the power of the mind combined with your sense of spirituality to heal yourself. This is something that you make a point of in your book, Living in a Mindful Universe, and also that we can change our DNA through our thoughts. That is a concept that I have to grapple with, but you've given statistics. But I just want to introduce yet again the wonderful Barb Smith, who can verify how, with stage 4 cancer, how her, and she's always positive, she's a delight to have around, her positive mindset and her sense of spirituality helped her to overcome her stage 4 cancer. Barb?
Thanks, Julianne. I'm enjoying this conversation very much with everyone. This is terrific. Yes, so in 2004, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I had over 100 tumours in my body. They came up very quickly, even though we know the disease takes quite a few years to manifest. To cut a very long story short, I used other methods to get ready to go into chemotherapy. So I wanted to get my body as alkaline as possible, only have green things, cut out all the, I'll call it so-called Western foods. So no dairy, milk, cheese, wheat, and things like that, just had everything green. But in the meantime, I then worked on my spiritual side and worked on my body and looked down at all my tumours and would say to myself, okay, you've been in here for a while, but time to go. And I had like little cards that I would read to myself and say, I'm getting better and better every day. I love myself. And the things that I found very hard to actually say to myself, and just over that period of time, just tried to do everything I could in my own mind to be on a higher level than what my body was. And strangely enough, or not so strangely, after about 2 months, I had more lymph nodes taken out, and my new doctor had said, this is incredible. What have you been doing? I explained, and she said, well, just keep doing what you're doing. And so using a naturopathic way of healing, I was able to get to a level when I had my blood tests every week. Things were getting better and better. And so believing in that, I had prayer, meditation, and just kept talking to myself. And it's very hard because, you know, we say bad things to ourselves. And now I'm very aware of when I wake up in the morning being grateful for the day, even though it's raining. I know it's raining here at the moment. I'll say, yes, but above those clouds, the sun's shining. And we know that because we were former flight attendants many decades ago. So always trying to think of the positive, but to catch ourselves. So if somebody's thinking, oh, I'm getting a cold, I'm going, no, I'm getting a warm. So those things over and over to myself. And now I am healed. It's my 20th year. So I'm very excited.
Well, too, what I wanted to mention, the book that you suggested, Eben and Karen, by Kelly A. Turner, it's almost relived experience for you, Barb. So a wonderful book, right, Barb?
That's right. The book called Radical Remission, it's virtually like certain segments in there where she had interviewed me or my journey. And so many of the stories are the same, where people had taken control of their own health. They have decided to do a certain thing and they have done things naturopathically to heal themselves. And then the feeling is, well, in my particular case, not with everybody else, but I thought, what if I'd given the cancer to myself through stress, worry, eating the wrong things or whatever else? Maybe I could heal myself. So I was giving the power back to me.
Oh, Barb, you're wonderful. What a gift you are in my life, as these two other lovely people are. Eben and Karen, would you like to comment on the strength of the mind and how you can actually use that spiritual and mindset to strengthen yourself and overcome what's the negative in your life. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'll just start. Just to summarize, Kelly Turner identified 9 factors that contributed to the healing of these cancer patients, and 6 of those factors were spiritual. And so I think it's important to just kind of, what do we mean by spiritual? What does that mean? So when you say the power of the mind, I like to remind people that it's the power of your spirit, because the mind, many of us just think, oh, that's what I'm thinking. And that's a part of it, a very important part of it. There's another part of it. And that is that you feel like you have meaning in your life, that there's an overriding purpose to why you're here, that you feel a sense of connection to something greater than yourself. Maybe it's just someone in a relationship or your local community, or something non-physical that's greater than yourself. This is what we mean by spiritual. And so, this is why bringing spirit over matter is so important, because it's so much more than what we're thinking. And it has a lot to do with what we're feeling as well, and what our underlying beliefs are that we may not even realize might be holding us back. All of those things are not measured by science. This is our spirit, our hopes, our dreams, our desires. And so that's why when you got to know yourself in that way and really uncovered, what am I doing to myself, and changed it all around, then you were healed. So absolutely amazing what the power of the mind, heart, and spirit can bring to someone's healing journey. Or you could call it your wellness journey, right? So I loved when you said, oh, I'm getting a cold. No, I'm getting a warm, right? Something different, so that you don't just fall into those expected patterns.
Yeah, it's important to pay attention to our beliefs. And so many of the beliefs in our modern society are falsely limiting. They don't allow for what we can really do. Now, in medicine, as a healer, as a neurosurgeon, you start that discussion by looking at placebo effect. We use placebo effect as the gold standard for more than 7 decades now. And the placebo effect is not just a sugar pill fixing somebody's headache, but in fact, in the big, large picture of placebo-controlled trials, what you actually end up realizing is we have a tremendous ability to heal ourselves. It's actually quite remarkable. And then you can move beyond just placebo effect in terms of discussing mind over matter and get into the realm of spontaneous remissions. In fact, that's where Kelly Turner got her database. Was she went to noetic.org, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and used a database that they put together in the mid-1990s that had more than 3,500 cases of people healing from advanced cancer, advanced infections, et cetera, far beyond any medical intervention. And it just as Kelly Turner determined for the cancer patients, there were spiritual factors at work in all these other people too. And I would say the pinnacle of this discussion, moving from placebo effect into the even grander power of spontaneous remission, is when you look at near-death experiences that have miraculous healing as part of their natural effect, like my case, and that the medical case report on my meningitis, a week in coma due to E. coli meningitis, as severely ill as I was. The medical literature doesn't really tell us you should expect any probability of survival from that, recovery from that. That's why my doctors were recommending stopping the antibiotics, taking me off the ventilator. And it was soon thereafter I came back to this world. There are other cases like mine that the medical world knows about. And that's where these kind of miraculous healings and NDEs become the tip of the spear in showing us the power of mind over matter, and especially as we come to acknowledge the binding force of love that connects us with each other and with the universe at large, and a shared meaning and purpose around that love and cultivating that love and kindness, compassion for others. That's where we start to reap the benefits of coming into wholeness. Healing and wholeness come from the same origin in terms of word roots, and becoming more whole is a form of healing. And that's exactly what we're doing, is becoming more of the soul we came here to be by opening ourselves to this far grander vision of self that goes far beyond the little petty ego. I mean, the ego goes into timeout immediately when I go into meditation. to allow me to cultivate this relationship with higher soul and that primordial mind that has tremendous power to bring goodness and love into our lives. And the more we kind of know that, spend the time in meditation. If you need a tool, use Sacred Acoustics. But any form of turning off the little ego mind, the little voice in your head, that little voice of fear and anxiety, is a giant step forward. So this is really just a different worldview we're offering, where you really kind of gain control over your emerging life and the features of it through acknowledging the power you have to bring this world of your dreams into existence.
Oh, this is, and it's such a gift that I've met you, because it's really enhanced my life and increased my sense of meaning. And this is part of what we will do here. So people, you know, be grateful for Karen and Eben, and that they come on and talk to us all and see if you can learn and live and love better. I have to finish off here now. I'm just going to say, could you briefly tell us on a happy note, Karen, your experience with the whales?
Yes, this is actually how we end the book, Living in a Mindful Universe. Eben and I were in Maui, one of the islands in Hawaii, and we were invited to go out into the bay on kayaks with someone. And we were hoping to see whales, but we weren't sure. And so we were in two kayaks, two people in each one. Eben and I were in a kayak, and then two women were in the other kayak. So we started heading out, and Joyanna, our guide, turns to me, because I was in the front. We were in the front of the two kayaks. And she said, "Hey, Karen, which direction do you think we should go?" And I sort of felt into my heart. I didn't think with my mind. I just thought, where should we go? And I was drawn to a certain connection and direction. I said, let's go that way. So we started paddling out, and then she says, some time goes by, and she says, "Hey, Karen, what sound would you make if you wanted to attract a whale?" And I was familiar with whale sounds, and so I started making whale sounds, which kind of sound like really deep and resonant and kind of warbly. This is how they communicate underwater. And so it all turns into this kind of om kind of sound, and we all start going om. And I felt my heart activate. I felt something in my heart, and I said it out loud. I said, "Oh my gosh, I just felt my heart." And right then a whale appears out of the water right in front of us. And this was so exciting. This whale was turning around, you know, rolling around and blowing water, just very clearly playing with us. And before we know it, we see there's also a baby whale. And so this is a mother and the baby whale. Eben decides he's going to jump in and see if he can get closer. I'm like, I'm staying right here. But as he's jumping in, we notice some other boats coming our way and people on paddle boards. And they saw our little whale party. They wanted to come join us. And that's when the whales decided, okay, this was just for you guys. I think we're going to leave now. And before they did, the baby did this full breach jump out of the water. So we saw its entire body. And I'm telling you, a baby whale as big as a double-decker London bus, right? So a baby whale is not tiny by any means, but this was such an amazing experience. And I think because I had been leading up to that time, been so focused on developing the sensations in my heart, feeling gratitude and other emotions in my heart, not just thoughts of these emotions, but what does it really feel like? I think that's what gave me that warning that the whales had arrived. I potentially was interacting with their heart fields, and I felt it in humans before too. And it's an amazing thing to feel, just an amazing experience we all had.
Thank you both so much. Just so thought-provoking, and I think you brought a lot of joy to our audience yet again. And I love this title, The Synthesis of Science and Spirituality. And I think we've encapsulated that today. And we must look, Proof of Heaven, a must-read Scientist's Journey to the Afterlife, and Living in a Mindful Universe. Just wonderful. And please pop in and Google sacredacoustics.com, because like me, you could find something that might help you sleep or help your mental attitude and live a healthier, lovelier life. So much comfort, light and joy have you brought us today. Thank you so much, Karen, Eben, and of course our Barb.
Thank you, Julianne and Barb.
Thank you so much.